Welcome to Commit and Push, the podcast about how great software really gets built. I'm Damien Filiatrault, your host and the founder of Scalable Path. Each episode, I talk with founders, developers, and leaders about the decisions, trade-offs, and hard lessons behind successful digital products. Let's get into it. Okay, today I'm speaking with Kevin Williams, the founder of Ascend AI. Kevin, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Damien. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. So today we're going to get into agentic commerce. But before we do that, can you just tell us a bit about your background and what you do?
Sure, I'm happy to. I think everyone has different roads into artificial intelligence. In my case, I used to be a direct-to-consumer brand owner. I would buy intellectual property. So it turns out that everybody knows somebody who has a patent. Not everybody knows somebody who can market that patent. And I would acquire those patents and then build digitally native brands. And one of those brands got to be pretty large, selling internationally into Costco and Walmart and all kinds of other places. And we were spending 8 figures on Meta alone. And then Apple, being a great consumer-focused company, made everybody's life really difficult by restricting data access in iOS 14. So anybody who's listening that is a digital marketer will have a blanch about iOS 14 and what it did to our ability to have resolution on the data that we were looking at. To solve that, I had to lean into machine learning and be able to track billions of points of data and draw correlations between that data such that when I was placing my advertising bets, I would have a better shot of being right. Probably should have turned that into a product unto itself, but for me, it was more of an internal product. And I sold those brands to a private equity group just a few years ago, and it turned out to be just a few internet minutes before Mr. Altman dropped OpenAI on everyone without any instructions. So I was in that rare place in life where I had the right sort of expertise and a real understanding of what this could mean, and I had the time to be able to dive right in, and Ascend Labs was born.
And so tell us exactly what Ascend AI does.
Yeah, so Ascend AI does a bunch of things. We work with mid-market companies to develop literacy across all aspects of their business, usually starting from the top, building capacity in the middle, and then lo and behold, as the organization has more needs and more understanding of how they can use artificial intelligence, we're there to help them implement as well. So we've become a one-stop shop as far as doing the strategic advisory and doing the implementation all the way through the stack. And because of my background in direct-to-consumer and online commerce, there's a natural fit for us with brands that have any sort of digital exposure. And increasingly, we've been working with AEO and GEO type efforts, and now the much more technical underpinnings of what's happening as the web starts switching to a more agentic experience for people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm hoping we can get into AEO and GEO too, but why don't we just start on what is agentic commerce? How would you define it?
So agentic commerce is, first off, it is what people are already starting to experience through LLMs. And it's important not to get too caught up in the marketing hype quite yet about where we're going with semi-autonomous or autonomous agents. We're a little ways out from there. But the reality is that the LLMs, having been trained on the entire internet, are picking up signals that they are then yielding to consumer responses. So in a very simplistic way, most of us have probably had the experience of exposing a layperson to LLM, and almost always the first thing they do is try and plan a trip. Like, what should I do this weekend in San Francisco, or go into Napa, or whatever it might be. And yielding the information is first dependent on the training set. And I know you have a technical audience, so I don't have to go into what that means, but it's first dependent on what the model has been trained on as far as those correlations, but it also is dependent on a whole bunch of other different data pieces that are floating around out there, such the LLM can yield the right sort of information and not dramatically hallucinate. So agentic commerce is first off just that LLM interaction that eventually may obviate the consumer interaction with a lot of websites. But at some point, you're also going to have real agentic commerce. And the idea of this is that consumers, and in my opinion, more likely sooner, companies are going to have their own buying agents or interactive agents that are going off on their own, trying to solve problems. As a consumer and as a consumer marketer, I have some doubts that people don't want to be involved in a lot of that process, and they just say, hey, agent, plan me a great weekend, and off it goes, and it does all of the things. That doesn't seem super likely to me. But you think about business-to-business applications where this is happening every single day, where you have, say, an RFP agent that's going out there to find the right match for whatever the product is, whatever the need is. A corporate buyer, I'm holding up a pen, needing to buy 10,000 pens. Like, they don't really care. They just need their agent to go do the fulfillment. In fact, they're probably not even triggering that. That's probably going to be triggered by an MRP or something behind the scenes that's recognizing a low inventory level based on certain rules. It's going to go out and it's going to find the best match that it's looking for, and it's going to convert. It's going to put it into a cart. It's going to create a PO, whatever it is for the individual organization, right? And that's where it gets really tricky, because is it getting the right information, or is it hallucinating? How do you have high confidence in these systems? And the answer is that well, it's complicated, that there's a lot that's going on under the hood that creates potential matches between hypothetical agents, because this isn't really a thing yet, and future agent states that people are working on. And then, of course, just the LLM type interface. So that was slightly long-winded, but agentic commerce is the automations of how that search by find function works.
Yeah, I'm going to probably try to dumb it down a little just for me and other people. So I do this all the time. I'm like, hey, I did this exact thing. I said, hey, I want some shoes. I tell ChatGPT all the time, like, hey, I want some shoes that are kind of light colored and casual sneakers, right? And then I'll say, go find me like 10 options. And then and then it'll come back with 10 options. And then that's as far as it can take it right now for me. You know, like then I have to go click on it and then do the whole website and the checkout. So, I mean, is shoes a reasonable example that we could do?
Sure. It's great. It's a great example.
Okay. And I know you sort of like landed on the B2B example, but do you think this is going to be more adopted by B2C or B2B first? Or is that hard to say?
It's hard to say, because the answer is going to be both and yes. It's just whose needs. I will say that LLM-based commerce, so ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever your choose your own poison LLM is, that will be very consumer focused. The agent parts, I believe, will be led by business to business cases, just because consumers like shopping. So the case you're describing there is agentic commerce. It's just not an agent who is doing the buying. There's sort of semantics in there.
Well, so maybe we can get into a little both, but let's start on the B2C. Yeah. So, I mean, this kind of, the first part of it is already sort of happening, right? You're like, hey, go out and find these options. And then are you saying that in the future, I'll just say, hey, I like these ones, buy them for me? You know, like write in ChatGPT, like, hey, can you buy those New Balance shoes for me? And then it'll just have my credit card info. It'll have my address. It'll just, you know, get the transaction done itself, and I won't have to do any of that. Is that sort of the ultimate goal for a lot of these?
Yep. I think I said it a few minutes ago, but this idea of zero-click commerce is what's coming, and it's a lot of marketing jargon in there. But zero-click commerce means the entire transaction will happen in the LLM. So you never actually click on that link to go to the cart to check out. But when you think about it, that creates operational complexities for the vendor. OpenAI doesn't have any plans to be like Shopify and be able to offer products. Or who knows? Who knows what Sam Altman has planned? But I don't think that that's in the roadmap. And so the vendors still have the purpose of being able to facilitate that transaction, and that means that they have to be able to receive payment. They have to be able to receive data about the customer such that they can ship the product. They need to be able to receive the transaction layer in some sort of secure way, because as you well know, there are risks abound among LLMs. So that tokenization of credit card information and how that gets passed back and forth. And importantly, the brand has to be providing information on the other side of the coin that isn't just the information that's been essentially scraped off of the shoe product detail page. So it's a Nike Air Jordan or whatever, and there are a bunch of words on the page, but those are human words that, yes, there may have been training through an LLM training process that's made associations between those words, but it's not particularly tangible to the LLM what it's looking at, particularly when you get near space. So the red shoe versus the blue shoe can easily blur together. You get hallucinations, and when that correlation coefficient drops, it's not going to want to yield anything. So everybody has a vested interest in this zero-click commerce of providing the best information they can to best match the consumer's needs, and then to facilitate the transaction operationally so that the shoe actually shows up on your door and your credit card gets debited, and do so in a way that isn't sacrificing security.
So a quick pause here. I wanted to tell you a bit about why I started my software staffing company, Scalable Path. Back in 2008, I was working on a client project with some developers in Argentina, and I saw how amazing it was working with people in my time zone who were just as available as people in my office. So in 2010, I started Scalable Path to help companies take advantage of this underutilized talent pool. And since then, we've built a platform of over 40,000 developers, and we've placed over 600 of them with over 300 clients. So if you're looking to hire top-notch dev talent at a fraction of the cost of hiring locally, visit scalablepath.com/commit. And as a listener of the podcast, you can get 20% off your first month. I'd love for you to give us a try. Yeah. Well, maybe try to say this in a different way. So right now, mostly what's going on is these LLMs are scraping web pages made primarily for humans, and they're doing their best they can with that. And are there already like products or agentic, I don't know, commerce agents that are just trying to interact with the existing web as it is? Or are people just like, no, that's not going to be a thing. We need to build new APIs and endpoints for these agents to go interact with that are not for the humans?
No, they absolutely are. I mean, there's the Atlas browser, which is OpenAI's agentic browser. And if you wanted to set it loose with credentials to go buy some shoes, you probably could. It would be really painful, and it would take a really long time. And anybody who's experimented with these browsers has seen this, because what is it going to do? It's likely going to go to the site, and it's likely going to take a screenshot of the site. And then it's going to run an internal prompt to figure out what the heck it's looking at and whether this is the right thing or not. It's going to go into spirals of doubt and self-loathing as it's like trying to figure out how to figure it out, right? So what we have to do is we have to clarify the matrix essentially for it, such that it's not doing that screenshot thing. It's getting the data it needs from the site itself to be able to come up with the right decision making to do things.
Right. Okay. And that's where we get into things like ACP and AP and UCP and AP2. Is that the space that what we're talking, or is that also AEO and GEO? Like, where do you want
Okay,
to start with all the acronyms?
so it's so hard to like anything AI. It's like everything is so interlinked that as somebody who
Yeah.
like provides solutions here, like I can't just go into an organization and just like solve a problem unless that organization really understands AI and really understands what they want to solve. I almost always have to back up and do education about how all of these different pieces work together because it is just so dang complicated, right? So in this case, let's start with AEO and GEO. I think we're not going to go super deep here, but somebody just blanched in your audience, like, why is he talking about AEO and GEO? Internally, we actually talk
Let's
about
define
these
those.
differently.
Let's define those real quick,
Yeah.
just in case.
Yeah. So AEO is answer engine optimization. So this is the quick hit experience that most normal consumers are getting when they go to Google and they get an AI answer. You used to get a snippet back that would like try and answer your question, and everybody was always trying to optimize for your snippet because you would end up at the top of search results and you wouldn't have to pay the Google tax, right? So answer engine optimization is making sure that you're answering those top level questions. And it's generally a matter of site schema, of making sure that the right information is being presented, such the LLM is like, oh, okay, cool, this matches. Gemini says, great, here's your answer. You win today, brand. And off you go with your day. The reason we differentiate between this and what we call GEO, which is generative engine optimization. And by the way, this is not like, there's no like commonly accepted, this is what how we're going to talk about it, like we do with SEO and other things. Somebody will, this is just for my sanity. I need to think about these a little bit differently because they're different exercises for a brand. GEO is more like the modern version of search engine optimization, but it goes way beyond just what's on the site. It has to do with how your site is linked and referenced throughout the rest of the neural net in the LLM training set. So that means things like reviews and consumer sentiment and all of these other pieces that are floating around out there. And it's really tough for brands right now to figure out what to optimize because they're not just not to get into SEO speak, but not just like doing content and backlinks and like bouncing things back and forth. Now they have to do this moderation of the broader community and try and influence that, which is why for those of us who like Reddit have just been besieged by like Reddit-based AI bots because Reddit is known as a place that the LLMs are looking for validation in terms of GEO. Right. So now this is sort of the squishy layer. AEO is a little bit technical, having like FAQ accordions and things like that. And by the way, we're not just talking about products here, like shoes. It's anything that transacts online, and that could be properties. Heck, it can be an appointment. Like if you have a website that is transacting, it may not have a financial transaction, but there's some handoff that needs to happen with the LLM, right? So optimizing for AEO, relatively straightforward, starting to become established. GEO is more of a lift as far as relevance and good content. I like to say that a marketer's job in GEO is just to be a better marketer. Like they really need to give really good information, not just a whole bunch of AI slop that comes out. But you're still in like sort of non-technical marketing land here.
Yeah, but all of this AEO and GEO stuff you're talking about is just sort of the discoverability and like making it into the LLM's short list of responses to the user. So you're getting the user to know about you. And then if they decide they want to do a transaction with you, that's where ACP, UCP, and AP2 come in, right?
Oh my gosh, sort of. So the
No?
next part is it's close. There's a layer here
Okay.
that I like to talk about it as traction points for the LLM, and it kind of goes back to that idea of taking a screenshot of a page. And that would be heinously expensive for the LLMs to do it that way. So they're looking for the fastest, bestest answer that they can get, and you want to do that. And the way that you do that is first off by providing the basic information. So the very basic are things like ACP, which is sponsored by OpenAI, Stripe, and Shopify. So if you're operating in that world, ACP is going to convey a bunch of information about availability, about weight, this sort of product data stuff that's like schema, okay? And, find me a shoe that's available this week that's red. Okay, cool. ACP matches to the shoe, it's available, click, and you're good. At that point, you're not actually transacting yet. You will shortly in the Shopify universe, but you've at least found the right shoe in the right color. But what if you wanted something that was like, find me a shoe that's gonna really make me feel good on the court? Like, not performance. Like, we've been marketing product performance forever, but this is like a benefit of the product. And it might be somewhere in the product listing. It's unlikely to be. It might be somewhere in product reviews, like this shoe makes me feel awesome on the court. Okay, so now you have this sentiment factor that is being tied to the product, and that gives the LLM a traction point, okay, that it can latch onto. And that is conveyed by Google's UCP, which is the new guy on the street, launched just a couple weeks ago. UCP does some other stuff as well, but you'll have like listings for occasion, sentiment, recipient, etc. that are in there. The other ways that doesn't do you a lot of good if you're operating out of the Google universe. So Gemini, fantastic. It can match your product to your Google product feed, has sentiment, you're cooking with gas. But a lot of consumers, in fact, most consumers, if they're not using just Google AI answers, are actually on ChatGPT. So if they're on ChatGPT, Sam Altman doesn't care about UCP, at least not yet. Maybe he will eventually as a unified standard. They now have to care more about, there's a term for all of this, which they're calling it the attribution spine, or we call it that. That's what it's called. Just all of these different pieces that have to come in here. If you're operating in OpenAI, ACP is part of that, but it doesn't provide the full enrichment. So you also have to lean into schema. So schema is generally just JSON descriptors right in a product detail page, but you need to do so in alignment with one of the standards. So the most obvious one that people lean into is schema.org, which again, you have occasion, sentiment, recipient, like this is a great gift to buy for mom. So recipient is mom, occasion is birthday, sentiment is love, affection, whatever it might be, that is in the schema of the page. Great to talk about on an individual product, a real lift if you have tens of thousands of products and figuring out what the heck that is all going to mean, but that's sort of, I digress a little bit. And then you can syndicate things also through something called APP. It's just like acronym salad. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
it's just terrible.
And we're not defining them either. So like,
yeah, well,
do people? Is there so many that we shouldn't even bother?
Like, you shouldn't even bother. Like you should. Like you just need to know like what they actually mean. Unified Commerce Protocol. Yeah.
Agentic Commerce Protocol.
Yeah, agentic Commerce Protocol, and it's all like you let the marketers. Well, the marketers haven't gotten to it yet because like the platforms are just like rolling forward with these solutions and nobody even really knows how to talk about them yet. Anyway, so you want to be able to syndicate that information as far and wide as you can. And there are other ways that you can do that. So APP is one of those means. So that's the front end. Okay. And that's,
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? Like all ACP and UCP, if you're have an e-commerce website and you're say, I want to adopt these protocols to improve my reach or whatever. Are these just things you're changing about your web page and the code on your web page? Is that all it is? Or is it like you're exposing a separate endpoint or I'll just stop there and
yeah. It depends. It depends.
Because that's what like my audience is like builders and like web developers and stuff. And they're like, okay,
where's the
all this talk is great, but like what are we having? What do we have to change? What do we actually have to build? Is it just iterating on the web page or is it something new?
So UCP, which is Google's, will be administered through the Google Merchant Center. So that's the endpoint there. What that doesn't answer is the enrichment layer of how do you get all of this information into that feed. You already have the feed. That's how you do Google Ads. So the availability, basic information, but right now it's basically created additional fields that Gemini in particular is going to be looking for. And yeah, there's the endpoint, but you have to populate that endpoint. And that's
let's dig into that with Google.
Yeah.
Like there's a special feed. And this is just all new to me. So like people have been doing this already to be in like Google shopping results or something.
Yep.
And it's like you make a special endpoint that Google consumes, like sort of like a sitemap XML kind of thing, but just for commerce, or is it reading, or is it scraping it's not scraping your web page?
Nope.
No, it's a special feed, like an XML feed or JSON feed. And Google's comes and reads that and stays up to date on your inventory and stuff like that.
So you use product feeds and Meta as well as far as carrying information for advertising. So anybody who's advertising in the major platforms is familiar with product feeds. So this is a new dimension to the product feed with more enrichment. But
it's the same feed that's being enriched. It's being tweaked.
Well, there's not a great solution in place yet. This is days old, so just take all of this with a grain of salt as far as how it's going to mature, because I'm sure Google's thinking about this. Like, okay, great, I've got 10,000 pairs of shoes. How the heck do I get sentiment of each of them into this feed? That's going to be a nightmare. So that's Google. The other one, and the reason why the answer was yes to is it an endpoint or is it just on the site, is schema.org is really just JSON on the site, and figuring out how to systematize that. And then yes, as far as being a gateway, because APP is a syndicating gateway, so it's an endpoint as well. And you can use a combination of UCP data, schema.org data, and ACP data to enrich the APP data that then pushes through the gateway. And then what's cool about that one is it's being syndicated across a bunch of LLMs. So that one's, as opposed to a traction point, that one's a little bit more of a cannon. So it allows your data theoretically, and this is all again in motion, to get out to multiple LLMs in one shot such that they have a common understanding of your product. So if somebody wants to shop on Grok or somebody wants to shop on Perplexity or whatever the heck they're using, your product is going to pop up in a similar fashion on all of them.
Okay, so you just need to have, in addition to your website, you have to have these extra feeds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's multiple different feeds?
So that's the challenge is if there is no one feed to rule them all yet.
Okay, yeah. So you just have to have multiple feeds that kind of are slightly different that you support. And you're just building these extra endpoints as OpenAI and Google are saying.
MCP in our universe.
Yes.
Okay.
That I'm more familiar with. Yes.
MCP became a standard, and it's now part of that not-for-profit that a bunch of the LLMs founded, which cool, that's great. We're just going to move on. We're not going to battle this out. The problem with these standards is they're too closely tied to direct business models of the incumbents. So Google needs to own the product feed because Google will eventually start monetizing LLMs, right? And if they let other people muscle in on it, then that could create a strategic problem for them long term. So it's similar for OpenAI, also now running ads. We can talk about ads on OpenAI and whether that's a good thing or not, but like their business model is now predicated on being able to capture certain parts of this information. And the last thing they want to do is give that to Google. So yes, you're going to have to, for at least the short term, you're probably going to have to run multiple feeds to get the widest amount of attention possible.
As you may know, I run a vetted talent platform called Scalable Path, and I'm offering a 20% discount to listeners of the podcast. So if you're interested in scaling your dev team faster and smarter, visit scalablepath.com/commit. Yeah. Okay. Now, is anybody implementing like an MCP endpoint to give agents like tools to buy stuff? Is that a thing? Or are they saying, no, that's not how it's done?
You
It's
know,
like, that seemed like that's what my mind went to when I thought how agents work. It's like, let's expose an endpoint as an NCP server. It's a tool to, if I sell shoes, it's a shoe buying tool. So if I'm an agent, I can go use that tool and see all the different actions available, and I can, browse and then
yeah, the problem is that
purchase.
there's no there's no standard endpoint there, right? So it would have to know what it was looking for and be able to look for that MCP and then dive in and do its thing. And the theory is great, right? And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way it shakes out. I mean, essentially, you're going to see like Expedia, big fish like Expedia, like they will have these built-in applets, and I suspect that those like OpenAI hosted applets that are rumored will essentially be some sort of an MCP setup, but it's an MCP setup that is thoroughly known.
An applet, like that's like from ancient times.
The terminology is wrong. It's it is essentially a brand app is what they're talking about in OpenAI, and then there's a captive experience there. And I'm not privy to how Expedia is doing this, and I haven't seen any of these in the wild yet, but I suspect they're going to work almost exactly what you're describing. So it's this known distribution system. I don't know how that works out for consumers, because those, like Expedia takes a 25% commission on most hotel bookings. So the hotels aren't going to love that for sure. They're
Mm-hmm.
going to want to find other ways of doing this.
Okay, so that was kind of deep in the weeds of acronyms and tech, but like, let's take it a little high level again. Like, um, what kind of verticals or industries do you think are gonna adopt this faster, or not adopt it?
Well, going back to your earlier question, D2C or D2B, like it's going to be
Sure.
D2C, because they are both seeing the opportunity, um, and they have a real challenge as far as site visitorship going on. We're seeing organic search declining as much as 40%, depending on the brand. If you have a young, hip, like male oriented brand, your organic traffic, like just the traffic that comes to your site, is probably down as much as 40 to 60%. If you have a brand that caters to like older female knitters, you probably haven't noticed very much. But like brands that are like closer to that existential horizon, like, oh my gosh, we've got to figure this out, this is giving us a glimmer of hope, we're going to lean into this fast and hard and see if it gives us an advantage. And there are signs, we like to think the LLMs are omnipotent and whatnot, but there will probably be early mover advantages to people who get themselves properly mapped and give the LLMs enough traction early on, such that that self-reinforcing aspect of them kicks in. Oh, a lot of people are transacting here. This is great. Oh, wow. Let's give them the win as far as, best hotel for a date night in Hollywood or whatever the heck it is.
Right.
So it might be kind of winner take all, and the big brands are definitely going to be leaning into that hard.
Yeah. What's the current status as far as adoption? Like, what percentage of companies are adopting the stuff that we're talking about here?
Very low.
Yeah.
Very, very low. If you're a Shopify store, and Shopify is very impressive about how they're thinking
Yeah.
about all of this for sure. ACP just sort of is happening. And
Yeah.
ACP doesn't carry a lot of the sentiment, but it's just happening. And that's not an instant win for you, but whether you know it or not, you're probably participating in that already.
Because they're just building that feed. You're on Shopify, then Shopify provides that feed behind the scenes. You don't even worry about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's part of the value out of Shopify. So great,
And for that matter, any good e-commerce platform that you're using should do it.
Yeah, but no.
Soon.
But that's the problem, right? So like BigCommerce is one of the big competitors to Shopify. And the answer is generally no, because they haven't figured this out yet. And brands and these are often big brands, by the way, because brands will outgrow Shopify. I know Shopify will be like, oh, we can run trillions of dollars, but there are a lot of reasons for complicated brands not to end up on Shopify. Simple brands, even big ones, fine. But when things get complicated, a lot of brands have to move off Shopify. And in those brands, you're seeing them, it's rough because they don't have the native ACP integration. So they have to basically fabricate the ACP integration. And, there's other layers to this as well, but they're having to like basically fabricate all of the pieces. And nobody really knows which one of these is going to take hold, but you're going to lose your job if you haven't at least tried with all of them. So, again, bigger brands, more spend, really trying to figure this out. But in a year, we might be talking about 18 different protocols, or we might be talking about one or two, as things have consolidated.
Yeah. So you've talked about this zero-click world where, people are buying things and never clicking anywhere on a website. What does that mean in the context of like analytics for brands knowing what user behavior is around their brand and traffic and who they are and all the stuff that they would get out of something like Google Analytics or something better than that?
The answer is it's going to be really, really rough. That you'll see that it's called referral traffic is coming, and it's coming from somewhere. You probably will know which LLM it came from. You will know brand share on the LLM because there are 1,000 different tracking tools out there right now that basically run a bunch of prompts and determine what's your relative strength. If you run 50 prompts that are the same thing of best date night hotel in Hollywood, how often do you appear in there as a percentage? So that share of LLM voice will be part of it. But otherwise, you just don't have these traditional metrics like time on site and scroll and all these things that marketers have been optimizing on for a long time. And yeah, it's going to be tough. I think the ad market maturing. We'll see how OpenAI's big experiment with ads actually plays out. But as is, all they're offering is basically impressions. How many times was your ad shown and how many people clicked on it? That's it. And for a sophisticated marketer, that's not enough, particularly not to spend as much as they want people to in there. But for that to be an actual ad market, they will have to figure this stuff out. And I'm not necessarily getting into are they going to put the thumb on the scale? Can Expedia buy share? I mean, if you were Google, that's probably what they would do. But it's whether or not that user activity is actually yielding those results at the other end. And boy, and you're not going to know why necessarily. Like, oh, we spent all of this money on Reddit to develop this really wonderful reputation, and overall clicks from LLMs went up, so something good happened, and maybe it's attributable to our work on Reddit, but we're not really sure.
So essentially, the crux of the problem is when people visited your site, you'd get a request and there'd be all kinds of data in that request, and you as the brand would have access to that data, and you could plug in a tool like Google Analytics. But now, since no one's even coming to your site, all they see is ChatGPT coming to your site, right? And they can choose how much or how little they share with you. Like,
Yep.
as far as like who the user behind that was, and what drove them to your site. Is that essentially the problem?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's they don't want to be seen as being partisan, right? That's the big issue with running ads in these things, that we're all tired of Google pushing things just based on ranking shenanigans or people buying share or whatever it is. They want an authentic result, so they're not going to share that information anytime soon. Advertisers will insist on it. Eventually, if you pay for a click, the click needs to come with something like, this was the prompt. And then you can take the prompt times 1,000,000 and figure out what people are actually searching for such that it's working versus your brand share. And that will help you develop a strategy as far as the types of things that you need to focus on for GEO. Totally different skill set than we have right now.
Yeah. And that's sort of like I was talking about it more of like the organic part of it, and you're talking more like the SEM. Like, yeah, if you're paying and you're buying ads, you probably have more leverage to get that data. But if it's organic search or organic LLM or answer engine traffic, like even less probably, right? Like if I'm just having that conversation and I say, go find me these shoes that I want to use to play tennis, and then I say, go buy it. It just knows that some agent I guess they know who I am. They know my address if I bought it.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, yeah, they still have that. It's interesting stuff, man.
You do need to carry that. You have to carry that identity, right? Like you can't, as a merchant, you're going to lose a lot of money if you're shipping things out to people that you can't identify. So merchants will insist on getting that identifier. And that's actually, we're not going to go into it, but AP2 is the transaction layer through Google that makes sure that's all secure. Yeah, so the identity will pass through. The merchant is going to be totally ticked because they should know your identity. Theoretically, that identity is going to carry your phone number, your email address, whatever. Theoretically, I don't know. We'll see, like opt-in marketing or whatnot, because any digital marketer or e-commerce person will tell you that it's not about the first purchase. It's about the relationship you develop with your customer. And if you have no way of furthering that relationship, it's going to put a lot of brands in a bad place.
Yeah. Well, clearly you know a lot about this area, and appreciate you sharing it here. If people want to learn more or get in touch with you, where can they find you?
Our site is ascendlabs.ai. I'm also around and about in LinkedIn. I'm sure you can put a link down below. Obviously, I love talking about this. It is, there's a lot of other things that are going on in LLMs, but this is one of those things that's forming up to be a legitimate challenge for brands of all stripes. That's new. That's not just like some evolution of something that we've done before, and it's taking some lifting for people to figure it out for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Kevin, it was a pleasure.
Indeed, Damien. Thank you so much for having me. Sorry if I acronymed out too much.
You can't avoid it. You can't avoid it in this area. So anyway, thanks again, and do it again sometime, I hope. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of Commit and Push. If you found it valuable, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you're building a team, check out scalablepath.com to find top developers. Until next time, keep building, keep pushing.